Recording live from the ARC studios, welcome to the Sustainability Podcast. Our goal is to provide engaging discussions on a broad range of topics regarding cybersecurity, sustainability, supply chain management, plus much more. For more information and to get into contact with us, visit us at arcweb.com.
Welcome again to another episode of the Sustainability Podcast, where we dive deep into the world of sustainability and the energy transition, exploring innovations and challenges that are shaping our future. I'm Jim Frazer, your host today, and I'm thrilled to have a special guest with us, Toby McGraw, Chief Revenue Officer of Beep Incorporated. How are you today, Toby?
Hey, I'm doing great, Jim. How are you?
I'm awesome. You're at Beep Incorporated, and Beep has done some very fascinating work in the world of autonomous vehicles. Before we plunge into that, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to this industry?
Toby McGraw, I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Beep. In that role, I'm responsible for the full go-to-market motion. So everything from, early marketing, demand generation through business development, sales, all the way through long-term customer client success. I myself have been involved in kind of disruptive technologies in and around transportation and mobility for about the last 2 decades. And so I spent 10 years at a business called Zonar that was bringing commercial vehicle telematics to the fleet industry. And so we really focused within moving people, moving products, and doing work truck type of things. I had a huge focus within public transit. And so that's where a lot of the work and moving people. So I spent a decade there really building it up and kind of growing that up. From there, I went to a business called Hop Skip Drive, spent 5 years, which was a TNC focused on transporting unaccompanied minors. So something similar to an Uber or Lyft type of model, but geared towards handling students that were ages 6 and above. That's something that was a business founded here in Los Angeles, where I'm based. We grew that thing up. And so I spent about 5 years. By the time that I exited that, we had transportation contracts with some of the biggest school districts in the country, from Seattle Public Schools to Denver Public Schools and Los Angeles Unified and others. So I came to Beep really because I really am attracted at finding companies that are really focused on solving real world challenges, things that have been in place in the industry. And so in particular, some of the things that really drove me to Beep was just thinking about really four industry level challenges we're trying to solve for. The first thing being congestion. How do we think about getting more people out of individual transport and into some kind of shared model that could ultimately drive more people to public transportation? At first, cool as a lot of the different, TNC and robotaxi type of models are, and some of the promise that they have in terms of technology, they also have unique challenges where it's getting easier and more affordable for people to get in a vehicle by themselves. And that's not going to help congestion. That's not going to help what we think about, access to the curb and different things like that. And so how can we really drive people into more shared rides? The second thing is just thinking about safety. Something like 94% of accidents are caused by human error. As soon as you start having the conversation on safety, right away, people are focused on, the passengers in the vehicle that we're driving. But it's also those other vehicles that are out there. And then almost as importantly are the pedestrians that are interacting. How are we solving for those types of challenges? We think about the need to really support and enhance access for mobility options for all. And so when you think about individuals with unique needs, whether those are physical or things like visual and hearing impairments, if you think about a true autonomous implementations where we're starting to pull drivers out of vehicles, how are we able to solve for the other unique challenges of those types of populations? How do we make it easy and insightful for them to move forward? And then the fourth thing is really, all things sustainability and efficiency. So when you think about, implementing electric vehicles into commercial vehicle applications, like, commercial bus and shuttle applications, how can you do that in an efficient way that's going to really drive long-term value as it relates to total cost of ownership, uptime, availability, and different things like that. And so that's really kind of a background of where I've.
Well, thanks for that. This is a broad community. So can you describe the industry ecosystem in broad terms? In particular, for our listeners that may be newer to the subject, how do the different components like technology, policy, and, well, corporate responsibility interact across the very broad range of stakeholders.
Yeah. And so the industry as a whole, and this is something that's really continuing to change. And so, we try to really have a tight focus at Beep within, 4 key areas, which is, automation, connectivity, electrification, and then shared. And so you'll hear us sometimes talk about this idea of ACEs, and there's actually a coalition under that acronym, ACEs, which speak to those 4 things. And so, within private business, and so we'll certainly talk about kind of the private-public partnerships that we see, as well as engagement with various levels of policymakers from the local, state, as well as federal levels. But when you think about the private side, there's really a bunch of different people that are at the table. And so you think about, just those that are focused specifically on trying to nail automated driving. So you think about, at Beep, we're working with companies like, world-class and industry leaders like Mobileye and Oxa. You have others that are more focused on the physical form factor itself. And so in some cases, there are people trying to retrofit existing form factors. In other cases, there are purpose-built options that are coming out. We'll talk a little bit later about a business, Holon, that Beep is partnering with to bring an advanced application to market. For us, we really think about at Beep where, some people focus on the ADS, some people focus on the form factor. We're really thinking about, in a real world application of shared autonomous mobility, a driver, is doing a lot more than just steering, braking, and acceleration. So those other tasks that a driver does, when you think about things like fare collection, passenger safety, pedestrian interactions, all those things need to be solved for if you're going to, at some point in the future have vehicles running without drivers and operators. This becomes a really important talking point when you think about engaging, some of these other policy as well as educational stakeholders. To where it's really incredibly important. Something that has been top of mind for Beep, ever since we started was as we come into market, we're having those conversations with the local policymakers. We're having conversations with first responders. We're having conversations with other community advocates and leaders just to make sure they understand what we're trying to roll out. And so, as you're well aware, and those that follow the industry, there's been a lot of negative reactions to some of the autonomous driving things that we've seen in big cities like San Francisco. And we think that, some of the challenges there have been private businesses coming in and not doing enough to engage that public sector. And so that's something that's a incredibly high priority for us. The other kind of interesting piece that's there is just really around those that are educators within the world too. And so, right away people kind of jump to like, who are the higher institutes of learning where we're doing, research studies and different things like that, which are of course really important. But we're also doing things, as early as elementary school where we're presenting to STEM days and different things like that. So you start to get, the workforce of the future really excited about these opportunities. So often as people start to talk about automation, they're thinking about the driver themselves. And, if that driver goes away, what happens? The reality is there's a whole new world of development, that's workforce development that's necessary to ensure when we think about, a human in the vehicle doesn't mean there's not a human in the loop. And so when you think about supporting edge cases, when you think about ensuring that, technicians of the future understand how to troubleshoot LiDAR and radar and other visual camera technologies, it becomes a really important thing. And so we really believe when we're engaging this stakeholder ecosystem within a market that, yes, it's important for the public-private partnership. Yes, it's important to make sure that we're engaging policymakers and first responders, but it's also important to make sure that we're having those workforce development conversations and education conversations from elementary school through, higher ed.
Wow, that's very comprehensive, and it's a very rosy picture you paint there. So thank you for that. But there are challenges. So what are the impediments? What are the challenges, the hurdles, and how is Beep overcoming them?
Yeah, and so I think one of there's a few things that are top of mind when we think about challenges, but I think a lot of it kind of comes back to perception versus reality, right? And so, in particular, a lot of the automated driving folks have had incredibly negative reactions from some of the public, and I want to say that oftentimes the people that have the biggest concerns also a lot of times have the loudest voice. And so there becomes in a lot of ways an echo chamber. And so, a lot of individuals, when you're in cities like Los Angeles or San Francisco or Phoenix, where you see robo-taxis rolling around on a daily basis, more people that have actually taken rides. You've probably taken a ride yourself. Those that have gotten a chance to look, feel the experience, have a very different perception than a lot of people that haven't had that. And so, I'm Midwest born and raised, from Northern Indiana, kind of a small town, called Elkhart. And, I've done, various things like on my social media where I'm sharing, a ride of, our shuttles going through the airport in Honolulu. I've shown rides of, in a robo-taxi vehicle rolling around in Phoenix. And people are blown away to look at, technology where a vehicle is going down the road and the steering wheel is moving by itself. And so those of us in and around the industry, we've become accustomed to that. But the vast majority of the US doesn't understand the success that these technology companies have made and the progress that has been made over the last few years of bringing this technology to market. The technology itself is very, very real. And so a lot of what we think about as it becomes this, kind of perception versus reality is how do we educate the community to where the technology currently stands, and how do we really engage and demonstrate what's going on? And there's really no better way than to look, feel, try, test it. And so that's where, Beep's goal over the last several years have been to implement projects at a lot of different use cases, right? Everything from corporate campuses to college and universities, to things like national parks. We recently rolled out a project at the Honolulu airport in Hawaii. It was our first airport implementation to where we're behind security taking passengers from one terminal to another. And so the goal has always been within these are to start with a very, very manageable operations plan to where we're focused on lower speeds. We're focused on things like geo-fenced areas. A lot of the runs look more like fixed or even flexed route, more so than anywhere to anywhere. And the goal is really like, let's nail those easier to manage use cases, grow from them, demonstrate in time that these are not big, scary robots running around by themselves. These are something that are manageable and we're able to do. And so we really feel like in some of the communities that we've gone to where we've come in with some of these, first generation shuttle programs, lower speed, very defined routes, where it's really helped the public to understand like this isn't as big and scary as we thought it was. And as a matter of fact, this is, the engagement, especially these purpose-built vehicles, they're really friendly. It looks like something that you'd be excited to take a ride in. When I took my family to Orlando last for Disney World, one of the things they wanted to do was come to Lake Nona to take a trip on a driverless shuttle. That to them was almost as cool as Space Mountain or something like that, just because it's something that has real world applications. I think perception is definitely a challenge when you think about the public, but it's also when you think about policymakers and other individuals. How can we have early conversations? When you think about, workforce development, how are we having early conversations with, the tech schools, with the apprenticeship programs? How can we engage labor in a way to make sure that, this is something that can have really valuable future jobs and career paths? Like, how can we think about, re-education plans for existing folks? And those are the types of conversations that need to be had in an open forum versus kind of like some of the sidebar, like, oh, we're just not going to talk. Let's ignore that problem. And so we really believe that the key to a lot of this is just having upfront and open dialogue very early on in the planning process. So when you think about 2026, 2027 and beyond, having larger scale deployments of these programs, we've started to kind of connect the dots among those different community advocates.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I think that perception issue is, in my mind, perhaps the largest. For, at the risk of bringing up the name of Elon Musk, for a long time, we've been promised, fully autonomous driving from his company, and it hasn't happened. And I think that has led people to believe, well, we're really not there yet. And I think you've illustrated that we are there in some focused applications that are scoped out, spec'd out, that are either geofenced or on a fixed route or a changeable route, let's say. Because I know, actually, before we started speaking on our recording today, I mentioned that it has been quite a few years since I rode a shuttle at Lake Nona. Many years, but certainly pre-COVID. And, it was working fine then. I can only imagine, I haven't been on it recently, but I can only imagine the advancements that have happened since then. Can you help illustrate your points in a little more detail by perhaps citing some of your application stories? I know that there's, I read a great one, I believe, from Hawaii, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so just to, talk about a couple of different examples of existing programs that we're working on. So we launched at the Honolulu airport in March of this year, I guess is when we started the training. It went live for passenger service very early April. So there's an existing bus solution that's at Honolulu airport, the Wiki route. So if you've ever landed in Honolulu, you'll see signs Wiki route, and it's kind of like a downstairs that people go to and they get ferried to different parts. It's something where the airport, is looking at, they have a heavy focus, and the state of Hawaii at the DOT level has a heavy focus on sustainability and transitioning to non, internal combustion engine fleets. And so with kind of that nice fit with electrification, as they're kind of looking at it, they're also thinking about just the way to be able to supplement existing solutions out there, where we continually see across the commercial vehicle world, both on the bus side but also on the trucking side, driver shortages being an ongoing challenge. How can we think about using the technology where it is today to supplement the existing fleet operation? So that's one of the things within Honolulu, where we've been able to come in and be able to operate, 3 to 4 shuttles at any given time, to be able to run loops throughout that wiki route that exists there today, coming, across the terminals. Now, just a couple of caveats or like call outs to this. This is something that's behind security. So when you think about being, bag management, things like this isn't something that's, outside of security. And it's also something that's a little bit closer to, a dedicated lane. And it's not dedicated. There's mixed traffic, for airport and, some of the airport folks, working on campus, but also, the existing wiki routes. But there's not other, pedestrians or, private citizens, driving within that area. So it is something that is behind security. So when you think about how do you continue to show use cases and grow, kind of the next thing, then you start to think about how do you take a similar application to the other side of security. And if you're doing that, how do you solve for pedestrian and crazy merging traffic? And how do you think about supporting bag management and different things like that? And so, the goal is like, let's not solve all these things at once. Let's start a little bit smaller. Let's kind of learn and educate, iterate, and then you start to get more and more complex in time. And so that airport application is something that we're super excited with. And that's been the first airport application that Beep has ever done, nationwide. We do have some follow-up programs, that are already going to be, operational in about the third quarter of this year. I don't think I'm at a point where I can disclose where that is, but it is a large international airport that will certainly get a fair amount of attention when it breaks. Yeah. And, some other applications that we see very, very continually are, we're just, this year in January, we started a program in conjunction with Santa Clara Valley Transit, VTA, at the VA medical campus in Palo Alto. To where we're taking individuals that are staying at the Defender's Lodge to the main hospital entry door. It's something where it's something like less than 3/4 of a mile type of loop, where the shuttle's kind of doing that service. It's a beautiful use case. It's something that's had high levels of adoption. Previously there's just been a need to really rely on volunteers, driving golf carts and different things like that. But oftentimes appointments are starting before volunteers are available. In some cases, injured veterans don't have the opportunity or it's difficult for them to walk to the campus. And so there's a shuttle service that's really supporting, those types of use cases. It's been, incredibly interesting. And another program that we rolled out this year was at a junior college in Jacksonville, at FSCJ, where we've had the opportunity to run a campus kind of circulator type of route going between, kind of where the parking area is to like kind of the main kind of student center. So again, just something that's a very logical campus use case, where, there's these large built out communities. There's a ton of parking. There's no shortage of parking. It just means you're going to have to walk a mile. So how can we really support people doing that? Especially when you think about, Jacksonville summertime, being quite warm.
Sure. You mentioned a variety of form factors. What form factors is Beep focusing on at present, and how is that changing over time?
Yeah, so we've historically been rolling out the Navia and Ollie vehicles. So these are two platforms that have been around for several years, and a lot of people have familiarity with what Local Motors and Easy Mile and some others have done. So we've done a bunch of programs with them. In the future, really, our focus is bringing next generation purpose-built options to the industry. And so we have partnered with a large German business named Holon. So at CES in 2023, we actually rolled out together the Holon Mover. It's a passenger, fully electric, will be level 4 autonomous. It's equipped with the Mobileye drive system, up to 15 passengers seated and standing. It's something that will be built in America, will meet Buy American standards. So that those that are using, things like FTA funds will have the opportunity to do it. It'll meet all the, minimum requirements for ADA compliance, fully electric, as well as, meeting all Altoona testing and other things like that, as well as being FMVSS compliant. And so that's the form factor, the purpose built that we are focused on in partnership with Holon bringing to market. Holon is a subsidiary of the Bensler Group. Bensler is about a 150-year-old business. I say German based, it's actually based in Austria officially, but 20,000 global employees, like a 10 billion euro a year business, so a massive business with a history of bringing this. And what they've really found is this very interesting niche. So where they've been previously a tier 1 automotive supplier, they really see this interesting niche within these shared autonomous vehicles, where they're becoming a vehicle OEM. So they created Holon as the brand to do that. And so Holon US is based in Michigan. They're looking at manufacturing facilities. And again, we hope to have an announcement around what that's going to look like here in the coming months, where that'll actually be. And so that's something we're incredibly excited about. We actually currently have the next time that you come to Lake Nona, we actually have the Holon Mover physically in our building, and so you have the opportunity to go in and kind of look, see, feel, kind of what it looks like, kind of see the communal seating, get an idea of what that in-cab kind of rider experience looks like. Then we also have as kind of a parallel vehicles equipped with the Mobileye drive system that we're able to do demonstration rides in as well, to where it's level 4 capable, going places that are speeds around the Lake Nona community where speed limits of right around 40 miles an hour, but it's operating in mixed traffic at those higher levels of speed. And so for those that are interested, you get the opportunity to come in, see what the form factor of that next generation vehicle is, and then go out and be able to experience what the driving is of that as well. And so that's something that we are really laser focused on bringing to market in the next 2.5 years.
This industry is moving so quickly and is so dynamic. I hazard to ask you this, but what predictions do you have for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's all things, electric commercial vehicles have been, a big surprise, to where you've seen businesses, pop up overnight and disappear almost as fast, right? And so just when you even think about electric commercial buses, there's a handful of, or maybe two manufacturers today from what there was maybe, a dozen of them just a couple of short years ago. So there's kind of been this growth, extraction, kind of further consolidation. What I really see though is, in the short term, there's going to be one or two solutions that are really kind of coming to market that are very, very real. We feel very strongly and passionately that the combination of the Beep, Hola, and Mobileye platform is something that's going to be a large impact in communities starting as early as 2026. Outside of that, I think you're going to continue to see other technology providers continue to come to market. We're seeing higher levels of success. So when you think about, Cruise re-entering market, you think about, Waymo continuing to expand their footprint. You think about some of these other businesses, Zoox and others that are closer and closer to putting, things on road, with fares. It really is we're seeing this really nice coming forward. Now what I want to make sure that we're doing as an ecosystem of businesses are making sure that we're having those conversations with the appropriate stakeholders and policymakers, to ensure that we're all aligned. And so, what we're concerned about when we see things like, some of the bills, that have come through California where, individual communities can start to set their own rules around things like robotaxi implementations, for instance. We really believe that some state level, state down policies are oftentimes appropriate. And just as an operator trying to understand where vehicles are operating and there's different rules as soon as we cross this road, it becomes really hard if it's straight local control. That doesn't mean there should be local engagement though. We need to be having those conversations with the communities, so that they feel comfortable that we're rolling out a safe and effective solution within their towns. And so the goal being, the more that we can engage policymakers and educate them about, what the programs and progress really are, but also make sure they understand our intentions. And so when they think about, what are their priorities in terms of ensuring, safety and enhanced, transportation options within their communities, they feel like we're very much aligned as a community. And so, I think that there's kind of been this mindset around a lot of the transportation options where it's like, hey, we'll beg for forgiveness, not permission. And, you saw businesses like Uber and Bird and some of these grow really, really fast. And then there becomes like this negative pushback from industry. And so, our hope is as it relates to autonomy, what can we do to engage those stakeholders in a very proactive way, so that there doesn't become this whiplash effect of, we want to do this. The policymakers are going to come make some policy to try to protect their communities, but it has unintended consequences that makes it hard for, private businesses to operate. And so what can we do to really engage those? I think is going to be the most important thing, just to make sure that these businesses are continuing to go forward. The other thing that I think when people are looking at broader scale implementations is how are we preparing for the electrification switch, right? So it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I'm going to put 50 autonomous shuttles in this area to start this new service to drive all these riders to public transit. Okay, but where are they parking? Where are you storing them? And more importantly, is there enough juice in the grid going there? And so what we're really seeing people doing now are those that have, designs and really have higher level plans of moving forward. They're having those electrification conversations now to understand, both with their local providers or public utility, will we have to do infrastructure changes to ensure that we can do that? And so that's the other unique part of this, where the charging world is changing so dramatically, especially as, passenger cars are growing in terms of the number of electric vehicles. You have more and more stations across the country. How are we doing that for commercial vehicles? How many do we need? Where are we putting them? All those conversations are things that we need to be having now if we have any hope of deployments in 2 to 3 years down the line.
That's certainly correct. The permitting for a new substation is not insignificant.
Right.
I'd like to back up a little bit. We talked about Gensler and their form factor, and of course Beep. Talk to us about Mobileye and what do they contribute to your collaboration?
Yeah, no, that's great. And so really, Mobileye is the solution that's actually doing the steering, braking, and driving. So Mobileye, and we have some connected tissue to where, Mobileye is a public business, but is majority held by Intel. Intel Capital is also an investor within Beep. And so we have some nice connected tissue with them as well. But really, when you think about LiDAR and various sensor systems. They've been putting these on passenger vehicles for a decade already. And so they literally have, 100 million of their chips that are out in market, that have the opportunity when we think about how do we come in and actually map certain areas where they have existing vehicles out and running. We have the opportunity to crowdsource some of that anonymous data to understand, what are average speeds within specific areas? What does the route actually look like? And so when you think about some of the autonomous driving and really ADAS type of solutions, even down to level 2, that have had broad adoption from, Volkswagen and Mercedes and some of those others, a lot of those have been powered by Mobileye. And so Mobileye is an industry leader in all forms of sensing technologies in and around a vehicle. And because they're out there among, tens of millions of vehicles, we have the opportunity to collect that information to really drive smart roads and smart mapping opportunities. That's our connection with Mobileye.
That's great. We didn't mention the IoT data collection piece of this. And it wasn't one of our standard questions we had here. Yeah. But what does Beep do with there's a plethora of data that's collected about all types of things. Are there any plans to monetize that or just create some business intelligence around that?
Yeah, I think like most, and when we think about all things connected systems, and a lot of times, we think about the Internet of Transportation things, but also just the overall, when we think about smart signals, smart grid, other things like that, how can we really plug into that? I think step one for us is really thinking about how we can leverage data from various sources, really to drive advanced options for safety and utilization. Like what are the things that we can really do there? So if you think about a traffic light that's able to count the number of pedestrian crossings within a given day, probably use that data and design routes that are going to make vehicles operate in and around those types of use cases, it becomes way better. So if there's opportunity to reduce the amount of pedestrian vehicle interactions and still be able to meet specific headways and operations use cases, we should use that data to do so. And I think, before we get to the monetization of it, we're really trying to understand, what are all the different data fields and formats that this is available within that ecosystem today? How can we think about getting that in a single format that's easy to digest, that we're all able to leverage and work from? And then in the future, you might think about, is it appropriate or is there a need to monetize access some of those different data fields? Or is it just a matter of, hey, let's have a really smart and intelligent algorithm that's pulling in these different things to drive the appropriate routing decisions? So it's something that we have continual conversations with the people. We've even gone so far to think about, is there, vehicle to vehicle type of communication that we could start to plug into to understand, this vehicle is passing at this time, at this direction and speed. And is there things that we can do with that intelligence really to drive kind of the next level? Because what we really start to see is 99.99% of the use cases are going to be something that you can train the algorithm, you can train the computer to really manage on the automated vehicle. But if you're at scale and all of a sudden, you have tens of thousands of these vehicles out there, the 0.99 turns into real numbers where all of a sudden, we have tens of thousands of these incidents a day, which might be out of the programming. And so what we really think about there is, the intelligence and the algorithms will get you so far, but then you also are going to need some kind of human in the loop. And so we really at Beep kind of think about what can we do from a remote command center to really look at these real world daily exceptions. How do we troubleshoot them? How do we help resolve them in real time? We are not a business that's very focused on teledriving, physically taking control of a vehicle from a remote environment and driving it around. We do believe that there's going to be some mission management and remote updates that we send to where, yes, it's safe to go around that vehicle, using some of those, both, you could think about an environment to where not only could you leverage cameras within the vehicle itself, could you leverage the cameras that are on the traffic signals or other things to help remotely diagnose a vehicle that's in some kind of predicament that you wouldn't have expected. So those are the types of things when you really think about tying all this data together, in conjunction with a human in the loop, how can we really make this as safe and efficient as possible?
I draw an analogy. I'm here in South Florida, and we have a number of managed toll lanes that that actually humans manage the load in that toll lane. It's not just an algorithm. So I don't know the exact numbers, but if the average speed drops below X, the toll rate goes up, and vice versa. I want to go back to that connected vehicle piece, because that is almost a branch of the technology tree that's growing that is completely apart from autonomous vehicles. 802.11p and all that connected vehicle technology is a point-to-point network that sends out from each vehicle, or even conceivably from your cell phone, your speed, direction, location, temperature, humidity, headlight status, windshield wiper status, all types of different things that can be read with very low latency by another entity within, I think it's 100 meters. So that at some point in time, that is your pedestrian detector, because virtually everyone has a phone in their pocket anyway. And some vehicles that are not autonomous vehicles actually possess that today. But until every vehicle has it, you need a certain implementation rate for it to start really having some network effects. So given your unique position in the industry, what recommendations might you have for those that are operating a transportation system on a college campus, a shopping mall, an airport, a corporate campus? What should they do first, second, and third?
Yeah, I think what you don't do, I think is take that kind of existing RFP that you had and where it said EV, just change the E to an A and then ship it out. That's what you don't do. And I say that kind of jokingly, but you'll see anytime there's kind of a shift in industry or kind of a disruption, it's, they're trying to work from something. Managing procurement processes is incredibly challenging. You're managing this whole network of operators, of attorneys, of procurement individuals to try to build out this RFP. So people don't want to start from scratch on that, as I would, certainly respect. But you need to do more than just this change the title. And so what we've really seen, the most successful implementations have been where there's a spirit of partnership between the public and private sector. Early on, you're sourcing that through, meetings to help drive an RFI. Out of an RFI, you're able to take some of the best pieces of spec and really build what an RFP of the future looks like. But it's incredibly important to bring the private community to those early conversations. And, I think that there's always a lot of concern, if we have this conversation before the RFI or RFP, will that influence, and will it be a fair and complete thing? The reality, though, is the providers are the ones that have the subject matter expertise to help guide the public industry into making good decisions around what should be on the spec. Because you don't want to draw a spec that's so tight that no one can respond to it, or only one can respond to it. You also want it so broad that you get everything from small vehicles to buses, automated, human driven. And so the right answer is kind of somewhere in the middle. I don't think people should come with a specific perception or idea around this is the route. It should be around, okay, within this community, within these ideas, what are some of the top recommendations? What are some of the use cases that would be ideal for testing for further rollout, and be able to kind of have that more open conversation. And so for us with communities, it's really kind of coming in, kind of educating them on some of the options that are available today. And let's not let, today's limitations impact our thinking to what we're thinking about for 3 or 4 years down the line. So you kind of have to have this 1 foot in the present, 1 foot in the future as you think through how you're going to implement these things at scale. And so more than anything, I think it's just making sure that we're open to having those conversations between the public and private sector. And then, by the way, let's ensure that our local policymakers, both at local, federal level, are also being informed and brought up to speed with that. The great thing with where we currently sit, as a business, is there's been a lot of, federal dollars advocated to sustainability programs, electrification, other things like that. And so there are funding opportunities that are out there, but it definitely takes a strong partnership approach between public, private, as well as others that are, sending letters of support and other things like that. But you really have to build that consensus and that ecosystem of support within communities. And the sooner that you can do that, the sooner you can really start to build through the process. And I think, by the way, a lot of the other kind of companies, like Beep, that are kind of at this early stage, they're interested and excited to collaborate and work together. We're all kind of figuring out, people will be like, oh, who does Beep compete with? The reality is we kind of no one and everyone at the same time, because we really do believe in an ecosystem. We do believe in meeting our future clients where they may need to be. And so that might mean that they already have their own provider of vehicles. They have their own kind of operations type of center. It could be in those cases where Beep becomes, a technology play. There might be other cases where it's a full turnkey operation, and being able to be flexible to meet the public entity where they need us to be, I think is really important. And I think Beep, as well as other companies, are very interested in having those conversations. And by the way, there have been times where we thought we were competitive with someone, we got brought to the table, and we found out there's actually some fantastic partnership opportunities where, this piece of it might overlap, but you're doing all this other stuff unique and I'm doing all this other stuff unique. So let's kind of focus on what we do really well and go from there. And so that's really where I think the spirit of collaboration is not just public to private, but also in many cases, a lot of private to private partnerships as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stakeholders there, and it reminds me of quite a bit of time I spent writing standards for the U.S. DOT to land some funding opportunities for intelligent transportation systems. They have a very strict systems engineering process where you need to document or actually define your stakeholder communities, document their user needs, see which ones have consensus, and then write down those consensus-based user needs, refine them into measurable requirements so that you do have a spec that addresses the most critical needs and no extraneous ones have wound their way in there. That's a structured process, but it is what 508 to get funding. It's what you need to do there. I know it's that the same approach works with the Department of Energy with some projects. And frankly, it's just good practice, getting all your stakeholders to agree and to air out their needs early. Because as I've often said in the past, you don't want to build a bridge and then have the bicycle community say, hey, where's my bike lane?
That's right. That's right. It's a little late. It's going to be a very similar conversation. It's like, in this part of it, we want to have a dedicated lane. Okay. I think that we're building towards a world that believes, mixed traffic use cases at level 4 is certainly available, but there's going to be some times where it's, okay, well, we want a bridge over this, or we want a new parking garage for this. And so you have to start having those conversations and those thoughts very, very early.
Well, Toby, this has been a fascinating conversation. Do you have any last comments for our audience today?
No, I mean, more than anything, I just appreciate the time. It was great to get a chance to chat with you. And I think, some of the most important takeaways are this technology is very real. And so, we will be announcing kind of the whole on story more here in the coming months. But when you think about a manufacturer that's going to meet Buy America requirements, FMVSS, ADA, Altoona testing in the 2026 timeframe, 9 to 16 passengers. It's something that's incredibly exciting and something that we have, in some cases, organizations starting to line up for already just to ensure that they can be some of the first, broader scale of rollouts. And so the technology is real. There's a lot of work from now until, landing these things. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be a bunch of transition, even, when we think about when we roll out these vehicles originally, sure, they'll be level 4 capable, but does that mean we're pulling the operator off day one? In many cases, it won't. I think that those are going to be two very unique decision points where technology is ready. Now is the community ready? Is the public, transit agency ready? And so those are two unique transition points. But the most important thing is I think businesses like Beep are very interested in collaboration. We're open to having those conversations now, and we're really excited about it. So we appreciate, people like you, Jim, that are helping bring this story to a broader audience.
Well, thank you, Toby. Again, our guest today has been Toby McGraw, Chief Revenue Officer for Beep Incorporated. Thank you again for sharing all your insights today. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And until next time, keep us in mind and click like and share and all that social media things. Thank you very much, Toby, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jim.